All right. So I have two videos for you today. Two articles. So one is from Wired and the other one is from CNN. But they're both showing Trump in a bad light. One is because he's so desperate um to sell the fact that there's this invasion of gang members that he doesn't even listen to his own intelligence, which fair, he doesn't listen to anybody ever. He just does what he thinks feels good. And the second one is you may or may not have heard of when he went to a Ford plant. I think it was Monday. And he how should I put this? He engaged with a heckler. And not in a presidential way at all. But let's start with the first article from Wired. Trump warned of a Tren de Aragua invasion. U.S. intel told a different story. Which, again, this shouldn't surprise anyone that Trump, A, didn't listen to his intelligence because he just wants to scare people, or the fact that he even tried to fearmonger with an invasion of a gang that wasn't true because he's racist. All right. Let's get to the article. All right. As the Trump administration publicly cast Venezuela Tren de Aragua as a unified terrorist force tied to President Nicolas Maduro and operating inside the United States, hundreds of internal U.S. government records obtained by Wired tell a far less certain story. Intelligence taskings, law enforcement bulletins, and drug task force assessments showed that agencies spent much of 2025 struggling to determine whether Tren de Aragua, or TDA, even functioned as an organized entity in the U.S. at all, let alone as a coordinated national security threat. While senior administration officials portrayed TDA as a centrally directed terrorist network active across American cities, internal tasking directives and threat assessments repeatedly cite intelligence gaps in understanding how the group operated on U.S. soil. Whether it had identifiable leadership, whether its domestic activity reflected any coordination beyond small local crews, and whether U.S. based incidents pointed to foreign direction or were simply the work of an autonomous, profit driven criminals. Why couldn't it be all of the above? Um, this doesn't surprise me that this is the same man who designated Antifa as a terrorist organization. And let's face it, what the heck is happening with my phone? And let's face it, how is Antifa an organization? Anybody who is paying a lick of attention will know that Tren de Aragua is not, in fact, an organization, let alone a terrorist one. So the fact that this would be made up bullshit too, not a surprise. All right. Now, again, that doesn't mean that there aren't gang members in the U.S. because the U.S. has its own gang members. But to make it sound like Tren de Aragua is everywhere, they sent people with perfectly legit tattoos, but just because they were brown and had tattoos, they sent them to El Salvador to be tortured simply because they had tattoos that might have been in Spanish. And obviously, Spanish is a very scary language. Come on. I still think about that gay hairdresser who had a tattoo of a couple of crowns with mom and dad. I mean, what the hell? How is that Tren de Aragua? Even the guards in CCOT and El Salvador said that you are not gang members and put them in a separate place. So even the people who we sent these gang members to knew they weren't actually gang members. But anyway, the documents marked sensitive and not intended for public disclosure circulated widely across intelligence offices, law enforcement agencies, and federal drug task forces throughout the year. Again and again, they flagged unresolved questions about TDA's U.S. footprint, including its size, financing, and weapons access, warning that key estimates such as the number of members operating in the U.S. were often inferred or extrapolated oh my god, I can't say that word, analysts, due to a lack of corroborated facts. Together, the document shows a wide gap between policy-level rhetoric and on-the-ground intelligence at the time. While senior administration officials spoke of invasion, irregular warfare, and narco-terrorism, field-level reporting consistently portrayed Tren de Aragua in the U.S. as a fragmented, profit-driven criminal group, with no indication of centralized command, strategic coordination, or underlying political motive. The criminal activity described is largely opportunistic, if not mundane, ranging from smash-and-grab burglaries and ATM jackpotting to delivery app fraud and low-level narcotics sales. So, your typical gang? What the heck? You know, they make it sound like this gang is the freaking mob. Nope, that would be Trump himself. But, about narco terrorism. That's the excuse they've used to kill fishermen. Now, were some of those boats human smugglers? That's a possibility. But how is killing desperate people who paid smugglers to get them to a different country, how is killing them helping anybody in any way, shape, or form? But anyway, moving on. In a March 2025 proclamation invoking the Alien Enemies Act, President Donald Trump claimed the gang had thousands of members who had unlawfully infiltrated the United States and were conducting irregular warfare and undertaking hostile actions. I'm serious that this man just plays Mad Libs whenever he talks. He claimed the group was aligned with and indeed has infiltrated the Maduro regime, warning that Venezuela had become a hybrid criminal state invading the U.S. Right, which is why we got rid of Maduro but kept the rest of the machinery in place. Because apparently that's something that you do when you're concerned about such corruption. Anyway, at the same time, however, an internal Border Patrol assessment obtained by Wired shows officials could not substantiate those claims, relying instead on interview-based estimates rather than confirmed detections of gang members entering the U.S. In a Fox News interview the same month, U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi called TDA a foreign arm of the Venezuelan government, claiming its members are organized, they have a command structure, and they have invaded our country. Weeks later, in a Justice Department press release announcing terrorism and drug distribution charges against a TDA suspect, Bondi insisted it is not a street gang. It is a highly structured terrorist organization that put down roots in our country during the prior administration. Because Joe Biden lives rent-free in this administration's head. Documents show that inside the intelligence community, the picture appeared far less settled. Although TDA's classification as a foreign terrorist organization following a February 2025 State Department designation immediately reshaped policy, internal correspondence shows the group remained poorly understood even by senior counterterrorism officials, including those at the National Counterterrorism Center. Unresolved questions about TDA, alongside newly designated drug cartel entities in Mexico, ultimately prompted intelligence managers to issue a nationwide tasking order, directing analysts to urgently address the U.S. government's broad knowledge gaps. The directive issued May 2, 2025, underscores the breadth of these intelligence gaps, citing unresolved questions about whether the entities had access to weapons beyond small arms, relied on bulk cash shipments, cryptocurrencies, or mobile payment apps, or were supported by corrupt officials or state-linked facilities overseas. In a statement, a spokesperson for Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, she's still around, attributed the shortfall to competing priorities, telling Wired that the intelligence community was unable to devote collection resources towards TDA, prior to the Trump administration's giving it the terrorist label. This is where the knowledge gaps stem from. Right. We have knowledge gaps, even though this administration's been in place for about a year, and they immediately went after a terrorist organization, even though they were operating under bad information. I'm sorry, how is this helping you? You're basically saying, oh, we assumed that they were terrorists before we actually got enough intelligence to do so. Okay. The tasking order makes clear those uncertainties extended beyond TDA's past activity to its potential response under pressure. Issued by national intelligence managers overseeing counterterrorism, cyber narcotics, and transnational crime, it flagged a lack of insight into how TDA and several Mexican cartels might adapt their operations or shift tactics in response to intensified U.S. enforcement. Similar limits surface in records from White House-run interagency task forces known as HIDTA, or High-Intensity Drug Trafficking Areas, which show counter-narcotics officials, too, were working with a materially limited understanding of TDA's activities. In a July 2025 bulletin, a Northern California task force acknowledged that available intelligence failed to meet the Department of Justice definition of a drug trafficking organization, adding that TDA subsets appear to operate independently of each other and do not appear to operate as part of a larger coordinated effort. So, again, they're a gang, a street gang, as opposed to this horrible terrorist organization. Now, I'm not saying these are angels by any stretch, but they are not a terrorist organization. But what would you expect from people who call Antifa a terrorist organization or call Renee Good a domestic terrorist? They just throw that word around hoping that the simpletons will just hear terrorist and be afraid. TDA members are not known to have assigned roles, the report notes, adding that leadership formation has not yet been identified. Additional HIDTA reporting likewise fails to identify a sprawling narco-terrorist enterprise publicly described by senior officials. A 2026 threat assessment covering North Texas and Oklahoma identifies Mexican cartels as the dominant narcotics threat, while characterizing TDA activity as street level. That sometimes drew on survey responses from dozens of law enforcement agencies and was compiled by a task force that included police chiefs, sheriffs, U.S. attorneys, district attorneys, and senior officials from the FBI, DEA, DHS, and Secret Service, among others. So it's almost like they just wanted to invade Venezuela because it would make Marco Rubio hard. Because, yes, that is actually what Marco Rubio wanted. To invade Venezuela in order to later invade Cuba. That's been his thing. Assessment by Customs and Border Protection broke sharply from broader law enforcement perspectives. Beginning in mid-March, CBP began producing its own intelligence products, quickly ascribing TDA with both the capability and intent to carry out attacks inside the United States, ranking it among the most capable foreign terrorist groups, listing it above Hezbollah and Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, while also acknowledging it had no knowledge of any specific or credible threat. Right, because these are the same goons who are helping ICE terrorize people in Minneapolis. Right, we should believe the thugs. CBP and the Department of Homeland Security did not respond to questions or requests for comment, because that's totally what you do when you're innocent. Just before April, CBP unveiled a much longer, sensitive but unclassified assessment. The report describes TDA as a growing national security concern, citing its exploitation of U.S.-bound migration and a range of criminal activity from money laundering to extortion to human smuggling. The report, which drew from across border enforcement, intelligence offices, and the FBI's own Gang Intelligence Center, warned readers on its interagency network that its findings relied on analytical judgments that are not fact, knowledge, or proof, adding that it might not always distinguish in print between assumption and fact. So that makes the assessment completely useless then. It's like, yeah, we have a hunch. Okay, how is that helpful? The same report acknowledges significant uncertainty about TDA membership figures, identifying markers, and whether U.S.-based subsets coordinate or respond to centralized leadership. In a section titled Intelligence Gaps, the agency outlines unresolved issues, including the movement of criminal proceeds where the network might seek to expand in the U.S. Those uncertainties culminated in a question that publicly the White House claimed to have already answered. Are U.S.-based TDA members operating under the direction of foreign-based leadership? The following month, a classified National Intelligence Council assessment, first reported by the Washington Post, found no evidence that TDA was directed by the Venezuelan government. When asked about the findings, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence dismissed the assessment, representing the consensus view of most U.S. intelligence agencies as the work of deep state actors, acting in conjunction with the media. Yeah, that is totally not sounding batshit insane. Remember that we're talking about Tulsi Gabbard here, who has never met a dictator she didn't like. Elsewhere, the CBP report undercuts assertions that the government had a clear picture of TDA's footprint in the U.S. It notes that it was difficult for U.S. law enforcement and the intelligence community to ascertain the exact number of TDA members due to a lack of determinate indicators and the adoption of the TDA name by unaffiliated groups and persons. So it sounds like a street gang. Ultimately, those limitations became justification for bending statistics to support the administration's framing of a U.S.-based terrorist threat numbering in the thousands. So basically, they're like, yeah, figuring out reality and how this group operates is too hard, so we're just going to make shit up. Over a 22-month period, CBP's own detection methods identified no more than 83 known TDA members at the border. To reach a much larger figure, the record shows analysts relied on a sample set of interviews, extrapolating that upwards of 3,000 TDA members must have crossed the border during that same period. An estimate based on the assumption that roughly 0.5% of all Venezuelan migrants who entered the U.S. through the southwest border had ties to the TDA. So we're just pulling shit out of our ass. The same assumption underlies the report's treatment of Venezuelan asylum communities, which it frames as potential risk environments shaped by sanctuary city policies and jurisdictions the agency view as weak on enforcement. In remarks Tuesday, Trump leaned into the same framing, accusing Democratic-led cities of giving gang rooms to operate. Speaking in Detroit, he said that starting on February 1st, the federal government would seek to economically punish cities and states that limit cooperation with the federal government, pledging to cut off any payments to sanctuary cities or states having sanctuary cities, which he accused of doing everything possible to protect criminals. And oddly enough, those are all blue states and blue cities. That couldn't be the real reason now, could it? The speech came as federal enforcement operations have expanded into hostile occupations of major U.S. cities. Deployments and mass arrests that have swept up citizens as well as immigrants, prompting protests and legal challenges from states and municipalities. Trump singled out Venezuela in particular. I was so angry with Venezuela, he said. They emptied their prisons, almost entirely emptied their prisons into the United States. Sure they did. At the FBI, TDA's terrorism designation sat uneasily alongside the Bureau's own prior analysis. Why is that such a hard word? In internal assessments before the 2024 election, the FBI described TDA as an unsophisticated compared to traditional South American theft groups. Okay, someone missed their grammar class. Finding its members favored opportunistic, often spontaneous crimes with a focus on retail theft from big box stores and exploiting other Venezuelan and South American migrants. While the Bureau consistently warned of TDA's propensity for violence, it failed to find any coordination among members inside the U.S. or any evidence of complex pre-planned operations. So, again, a street gang. In 2025, FBI field-level reporting appears to have remained focused on conventional crimes, including passing references to human weapons and narcotics trafficking with little accompanying detail. In April, a joint state situation report filed by Alabama and Tennessee field offices linked TDA to a retail theft crew suspected of smash-and-grab burglaries at Walmart jewelry counters in the region. While the report notes similar incidences nationwide with losses estimated at roughly $1.2 million. It implicated only a single confirmed Tren de Aragua member and makes no reference to any national security level threat. Yeah, it's almost like the Trump administration is making shit up. The reports sit alongside public statements from FBI Director Kash Patel, who also in April described TDA publicly as a direct threat to our national security, vowing to eliminate what he called a violent terrorist organization. Inside the Bureau, records show its terrorism screening center responded by convening a Tren de Aragua intelligence working group to coordinate watch listing changes. A distribution list obtained by Wired shows a April 2025 meeting drew participants from numerous DHS and Justice Department components, both state and treasury, and elements of the intelligence community and military alongside dozens of state and local agencies and fusion centers. Reached for comment, the FBI declined to respond to questions about differences between its internal reporting and how TDA was characterized publicly by its leadership. It did not acknowledge the existence of any terrorist threat, saying only that it remained steadfast in its commitment to working with our local, state, and federal partners to combat violent gang activity in our communities, including illegal acts carried out by the Venezuelan criminal gang Tren de Aragua. Of course. Similar low-level depictions of TDA activity appeared in regional drug task force reporting. A June 2025 Northern California threat assessment noted that TDA did not appear to be directly involved in drug trafficking, similarly linking the group instead primarily to organized retail theft alongside suspected involvement in at least 2 shootings. A separate assessment covering North Texas and Oklahoma alleged a connection between TDA and Walmart's delivery app, Spark, citing suspected identity theft used to exploit the delivery driver profession to facilitate financial fraud. CBP issued a similar warning that following months citing an unattributed law enforcement report alleging TDA members had been exploiting food delivery and rideshare platforms as a source of income and a means to allegedly facilitate routine criminal activity. According to the bulletin, TDA members, including some with direct ties to TDA leadership, used services such as Uber, DoorDash, or Grubhub by renting or sharing accounts obtained through personal networks or online forums. One individual, a known TDA member and Uber driver, it claims, frequently delivers food and drugs to individuals living in a migrant shelter. Others were said to be using malicious software to steal high-fee delivery orders from other drivers. I mean, can you believe anything that this administration says? I can't. Walmart, come on. Walmart, Uber, Grubhub, and DoorDash did not immediately respond to requests for comment. The document mirrors myriad other reports of sporadic crimes being loosely attributed to the group using vague attribution and low confidence language. In August, a law enforcement bulletin on ATM jackpotting, circulated by the Texas Financial Crimes Intelligence Center, warned that suspects involved in ATM malware attacks may be associated with TDA. In a separate August bulletin, the New York Police Department's Intelligence and Counterterrorism Bureau warned partners that TDA members might be attempting to infiltrate the local music scene. People allegedly affiliated with TDA have hosted parties involving DJs, officials said, adding that the gatherings may be an effort to potentially further engage in or promote criminal activity. I swear that one's a trolling. That one's got to be New York trolling. You know, the other government agencies who are completely convinced that every crime that's ever been committed in the history of America has been TDA. I mean, I just do not see how this is helpful in any way. All right. In written responses to Wired, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence invoked America's war in Afghanistan to explain the framework it applies to Venezuela, pointing to a conflict that stretched 2 decades, consumed trillions of dollars, and saw tens of thousands of civilians and security personnel killed, in addition to nearly 2,500 U.S. service members. Just as it found no evidence to support the claim that Maduro's government was directing TDA, the office added, the Taliban was never assessed to be directing al-Qaeda attacks. So, yeah, not great. Not great at all. But, now, if anyone could explain to me how that made any sense. Who said the Taliban was directing al-Qaeda's attacks? Where did you get this idea that that was a thing happening? I mean, it's like she's either everybody is pulling a Mad Libs or they're just so desperate to claim something that isn't true by claiming that there was this other thing that wasn't true. But, oh yeah, people claim it was true because reasons. So anyway, that is all I have for this article. So let's move on to Trump being oh so presidential. Trump flipped off an auto worker at a Ford plant. The White House says it's appropriate. I swear, if literally anybody else, I mean, not mostly Democrats, but if any Republicans at this point, if literally anybody else had done that, people would flip out that the president is making a mockery of the office. But somehow with Trump, it's okay. Cool. All right. President Donald Trump flipped off an auto worker as he toured a Michigan Ford plant in an incident caught on video Tuesday, and the White House defended the action as an appropriate response to someone screaming at the commander-in-chief. Because, Trump is a man-baby. A lunatic was wildly screaming expletives in a complete fit of rage, and the president gave an appropriate and unambiguous response, White House Communications Director Stephen Chung said in a statement. So, basically, in order to show that his response was appropriate, they have to completely and utterly make up what was said by this heckler. Sort of like they're doing with the video of Renee Good. They have to make shit up in order to make it seem like her murder was justified. Anyway, a 30-second video obtained by TMZ shows someone yelling in the president's direction, though it is unclear exactly what that person is saying. Are you serious right now? TMZ reported that the person appeared to yell, pedophile protector at the president. Hey, he was being nice. He didn't call him a pedophile, just a pedophile protector. Because as of now, he's not allowing the Epstein files to be released. So that's the best we have. Even though he is a pedophile. The video then shows the president pointing to the factory floor a few times as he continues to walk through part of the factory. He then flips off someone on the factory floor with his right hand. A second video is then played showing what appears to be a more zoomed-in shot of the same interaction. It also shows what TMZ suggests is a person yelling pedophile protector at the president while he is standing in one place. What do you mean seems to. Everybody else knows that it's not seems to. He did. And why do we know that? Because the person involved is being investigated by his job for doing that, because obviously heckling is beyond the pale now. In the TMZ video, the president appears to respond by pointing at the person and mouthing or saying, "Fuck you," twice. Do you people not understand the concept of this probably didn't have audio, but he most definitely was saying, why would he just mouth "fuck you"? T.J. Sabula, a 40-year-old line worker at the plant, told the Washington Post he was the person shouting at the president and that he was specifically referencing the president's handling of the matter around the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. He told the Post he has been suspended from work pending an investigation. As far as calling him out, definitely no regrets whatsoever, Sabula told the Post. CNN has reached out to Sabula for comment. Laura Dickerson, vice president of the UAW, which represents auto workers, said in a statement that the union would ensure that our member receives the full protection of all negotiated contracted language safeguarding his job and his rights. The auto worker at the Dearborn truck plant is a proud member of a strong and fighting union, the UAW. He believes in freedom of speech, a principle we wholeheartedly embrace, and we stand with our membership in protecting their voice on the job, she said, adding workers should never be subjected to vulgar language or behavior by anyone, including the President of the United States. Ford's executive director of corporate communications, David Tovar, struck a different tone, praising the event in a statement and adding, "We're proud of how our employees represented Ford." We've seen the clip you're referring to. One of our core values is respect, and we don't condone anyone saying anything inappropriate like that within our facilities. When that happens, we have a process to deal with it, but we don't get into specific personnel matters. Sabula, who told the Post that he identifies as politically independent and never voted for Trump, though he has supported other Republicans, said that he believed the president could hear him very, very, very clearly. He said he now believes he is being targeted for political retribution for embarrassing Trump in front of his friends. Yep, that's it. I mean, we know Trump is thin-skinned. He's historically thin-skinned. I don't feel as though fate looks upon you often, and when it does, you better be ready to seize the opportunity, Sabula told the Post. And today, I think I did that. After the incident, online fundraisers popped up raising money for Sabula. Since Trump returned to the White House, his Justice Department has promised, reneged, and then promised again to deliver new and potentially explosive evidence on Epstein's alleged underworld of pedophilia. Yeah, and just today, which is the 16th, they are claiming, it's going to take a while because we have to go through all these files. Yeah, how long are they going to do that? Probably throughout his presidency. The Justice Department has released thousands of files related to Epstein after Congress passed a law forcing the Trump administration to do so. But the department is still struggling to process the massive trove of files, CNN previously reported. Trump has not been accused of any wrongdoing or charged with any crimes in connection with Epstein. Okay, so that is the end of that article. So yeah, just another day of Trump being Trump. And again, does it surprise anybody that they decided to make everything Tren de Aragua? It's like Trump just learned Tren de Aragua exists and he decided, Marco hates Venezuela, wants a regime change, so let's just pin everything on them. Someone looks at you wrong, it's Tren de Aragua. Let's just do that. And of course, he's so thin skinned that most people who get heckled just get taken out, and by taken out, I mean actually, sent outside of the venue. But no, let's investigate him because we want to stay on Trump's good side because he could, throw a tantrum because as like the toddler he is. So anyway, that is all I have for this video. And with that, I will see you guys in the next one.